where I'd like to start, Kyra, is if you could tell us kind of what your first kind of encounters with your own mental health were before we get into like the treatments and techniques that you've been, that you've used or you've come across. So if you could start us there, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my first diagnosis was when I was 14. So I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and severe depression at the age of 14. But first time I ever remember that something wasn't quite right was when I was around 11 years old, and I remember dissociating for the first time and kind of looking at my hands as I was sitting down. And basically, I remember thinking that my hands were shrinking and I couldn't understand why, and I felt like I wasn't actually in my body. And as a child, as an 11-year-old child, that's very scary and very traumatic within itself, not knowing what's happening to you and what's going on around you. And, I remember my mum being there at the time, and I was like, Mum, my hands are shrinking. Like, what's going on? And obviously back then as well, there's not as much education as what there was now compared to what there was back then. So, I just remember her just being so confused and not knowing what to do as well. So that was my first kind of dissociation episode, and things trickled on from there. I won't go into too much detail about it all, but so 11 years old was really the prime time when I really started having mental health issues. And, I struggled at school. I had a lot of anxiety. I would come home from school feeling sick and anxious and all these kinds of things. And, again, nobody really knew what was going on, and obviously I didn't know either. So that kind of went on for a period of time. And then around 13, my parents split up, and that was quite traumatic for myself within that process, and still having no understanding why I was still dissociating from time to time. And eventually I ended up seeing a psychologist, and she was really amazing. And, she said I have generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and depression, which to me then made a lot more sense. I was like, right, that makes sense as to why this is happening. But I still had so many more questions. I was like, why, what is it within my brain that's making me do this? And I've always been, as a child, a naturally inquisitive. I question everything. I love it. I still do it to this day. I'm so inquisitive, and as a child, even more so as well. So, I've been looking on Google for such a long time, and I thought, around 14, I thought I was autistic. And so that's something that's always stuck with me. Prior to trauma, I've always been quite different and never quite fitted in, and I could never really understand why as well. So I continued doing some more of my own research, and I've seen so many different psychiatrists, psychologists, and mental health workers along my journey. And, so doing all of that, and it's kind of brought me to where I am today. So 2 years ago, I was diagnosed because I had a look into borderline personality disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So I ended up seeing a specialist in borderline personality disorder, or BPD, and, he diagnosed me with that. And then from then moving forward over the next 2 years, I saw specialists, and they also diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And honest to God, since it's been a very hard battle with accepting of the diagnosis, especially borderline personality disorder, I will be very honest, because of the stigma surrounding it. And because of, the societal stigma and the acceptance within myself. And so now I'm kind of at a place where, I'm understanding certain aspects of myself, dissociation. I'm understanding, more common ground and trauma. And, it's kind of brought me to where I'm at today, which is now I am studying trauma work and somatic healing work, and doing a coaching certification at the moment, and just really been delving into my own research via Google, which is actually, Google gets a lot of hate, but Google can be very amazing. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today.
Yeah. If you know where to look for it. I know an actual I know a PhD physicist who, she posted on her story this morning saying, "I promise I am a real physicist," because she was doing research on Wikipedia. It's like, I think if you know how to research properly, there's good information in a lot of places. And I actually think as well, especially within the mental health community, some of the best information is just with people with lived experience. You know, you're going to get information there that hasn't come through in the textbooks or hasn't come through in the studies, because once you put someone in a study environment, it's no longer their natural environment. So and I think a lot of times things that people learn themselves when working through things can be amazingly powerful. So with somatic healing and with DBT, which one of those two came first for you?
So they actually kind of came both together. So I would say, well, no, initially I started looking into dialectical behavioural therapy, and because obviously that's well known to be the treatment for borderline personality disorder. And I started doing my own research and ordered a few DBT self-help books. There's a really great one called the Neurodivergent Skills, DBT Skills, and that's been really beneficial. So yeah, the DBT came first, and through that I found the TIP skills, which is TIPP skills. So, and it kind of delves into somatic healing from that. So the T stands for temperature change, the I is intense exercise, P for paced breathing, and then the other P is for paired muscle relaxation. So by finding them skills through DBT, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and implement this within my day-to-day life and see what happens. And through implementing breath work, especially, I always get this name wrong, diaphragmatic breathing, I think it's called, or belly breathing. Diaphragmatic, yeah. Thank you. Has really helped with, just really getting to be able to, calm my nerves and come back to my emotional regulation state as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you define DBT?
How would I define it? I would say it's a combination of like cognitive behavioural skills and somatic healing modalities intertwined into one. So it kind of works from like what's called top-down versus bottom-up therapy, which is, by the way, I'm not a therapist. I'm nothing like this. I'm just...
I know. Neither am I. Yeah. Although occasionally pretend to be. No, we found out a couple of weeks ago it's not a protected term. I thought that was just a US thing. Apparently it's not in the UK. So like now I'm everyone's therapist. Oh. I'm just going to call... Yeah. Forget being a mindset coach, therapist.
Yeah. And basically... Yeah, so there's top down versus bottom up, which is bottom up is working with your body and focusing on your body before your mind, and then I think I said that right, yeah, and then the top down approach is your cognition, so working with your mind, and then connecting with your body. Yeah.
And which one did you say that DBT is?
Bit of both.
Oh, it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you started with this, what were kind of some of the big realizations that, that helped for you?
I think I would say, honestly, it just led me down a path of the somatic work. So that's probably been my biggest realization, is how much, my body was storing so much trauma and so much nervous energy and, anxiety, a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And I think that was a massive, light bulb moment for myself, because I kind of realized that, I'd done so much work with my mind, but my body just wasn't there. When I realized maybe let's try and do it the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you first got in touch a few days ago, I thought to myself, I've not actually, I know I know what the word somatic means, but I'm like, I didn't know it in the therapy sense or in the somatic healing sense. And, you know, a little bit of looking into it, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's bits and pieces of that, of things that, again, that various guests over the years have talked about, whether it's like an acting coach, like talking about getting into movement there. We've had movement where I started off as a personal trainer when I started this podcast, and we had people talking about how different movements would do different things. And, even like I occasionally teach my groups about things like how your body language automatically kind of preps you for something. So like if you think about like when a person's depressed, they're not like, yeah, I'm so depressed, like I want to tell the whole world about it. And whereas like when a person is happy, they tend to be bubbling with that extra energy. When a person's anxious, they tend to be bubbling with that energy, but in a runaway kind of way. Whereas if they're excited, it's bubbling with that energy, but want to run towards kind of thing. And I remember kind of like learning about like that in a coaching aspect, but never from the psychological aspect. It was always like, okay, how can we adapt our body language and change things within our body? And even down to the fact of being, I'm one of those people that needs regularly reminding to unclench my damn jaw. You know, it's like, oh crap, it's there again. I actually had someone about a year ago, like I said, can you just remind me of this, like every now and then? And she did, and every single time I saw that come up, because he was on Twitter, every time I saw I call it come up in the tweet, I'm like, it's like it was there, it was clenched again. Even the more aware of it I was trying to be, the more. So what then is, so as you said, the DBT often led into the somatic healing. Again, how would you define somatic healing?
Basically, from my own perception of it anyways, is kind of, there's a lot of different somatic modalities. So really working with the body, and so like bottom up therapy, which it's called. Really working with the body. So that can be different things and different modalities. Like there's a form called emotional freedom technique, which I do quite regularly, but I don't do it. I do it in my own version, my own way, and what I've found effective for myself. Like I kind of just do it randomly, but that's basically, just doing like tapping all over your body and kind of bringing yourself back to your awareness. So that's one of them. And there's various different modalities like breath work and, a couple of other things as well, which you can do to really get back in order with your body and then connect to your mind.
Yeah. So again, like with that, was there any kind of, you obviously had the diagnosis of BPD and CPTSD, which I imagine at the time or even earlier, you had other types of therapy or other types of, or other methods that were kind of proposed to you or used with you. How did this differ in terms of like style or effect or impact on you?
I think, good question. I'm actually trying to think of how it has affected me. I just know within myself and my nervous system and regulating my nervous system, not constantly being in flight or fight. When I wake up of a morning, and there'd be times where I'd wake up of a morning and I wouldn't understand why. I wouldn't understand, not why I wouldn't wake up in the morning, but why I was feeling anxious.
Yep.
And I was trying to rationalize it so often when there wasn't really any rationale behind why my body was going into this fight and flight mode. And so I lived like that for a very, very long time, and I just felt very confused as to why my body was acting this way. And then I guess eventually I found somatic healing, and that really, really helped. But prior to, I will say, cognitive behavioural therapy and other kinds of therapies definitely did help, like for that time and for that purpose. Like I'm not dissing any other kind of therapies or anything like that. That's absolutely not what I'm doing. It's just, I think what's really important is being able to find what helps you and what helps the individual, because there are so many different things out there. And for me, I tried so many so many different things from, I tried hypnotherapy, I tried, a lot of spiritual stuff, and then I also tried a lot of, science-backed, evidence-based and other modalities as well.
Yeah, I know. I tried it all as well. I tried a lot of I tried the spiritual stuff. I tried the self-help route. I tried the science-backed or evidence-based. I tried also. I mean, I've never actually tried DBT. I've done quite a bit of CBT. CBT works actually quite well with me, which I know it doesn't for a lot of people. CBT, I think I'm already quite a critical thinker, and I'm a very big overthinker, and CBT taught me to use the power of overthinking for the better, as opposed to rumination. Like, let's descend further into this and do it very, very skillfully because I know how to. But yeah, it worked. That worked really well for me. And DBT has been something that for a while now I've been intending just to even have a little try. I actually quite weirdly, I like being on the receiving end of various different therapies because I like to kind of experience them for myself. So I know that what other people are likely to experience. But I also am a huge believer. That it's pretty much all connected. And even if someone's got, like, in a lot of the spiritual stuff, people have assigned this is God or this is whatever to it for a reason why it works. And I think that, like, actually, the reasons why it works, we might not be always 100% clear on, but so much of the actual stuff that's coming out of science now is actually dipping back to some of the more ancient practices and dipping back. In fact, like, for example, acupuncture was once thought to be to do with meridians and to do with energy flow and all the rest of it, when, they've, from a physiological point of view, shown why acupuncture actually works now by actually releasing tension in muscles or whatever. I don't know how it works exactly, but so I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I think there's so much overlap in all of it, and that's important. And what you touched on before as well, which I think is really important, is the fact that there are different modalities, and there's no one size fits all for anybody really. It's like some people might actually find that a little chunk of this is really good for them. Other people might need that. Might find that this is exactly like what they need, and everything else before was kind of just leading them up towards that. So you mentioned that there are different types and different kinds of somatic healing. What different kinds are there?
So breath work is a big one. Breath work really helps with nervous system regulation. So it's just, yes, breath work. There's EFT tapping as well, and temperature regulation change, so things like that. So it's basically just finding things, to simplify, it's just basically finding things to help you regulate your nervous system. So that could be, dance, it could be movement, it could be, shaking your body, it could be anything which helps release that anxious kind of energy. Yeah.
So you said before, obviously finding a lot of this stuff out from Google. It's like, have you been guided through any of this through therapists at all, or has this been a completely independent journey?
No. So I've been guided through therapists as well, and I'm actually doing a course at the moment with a neuroscientist. Oh, cool. So we've been delving into that together, and as well as doing the certification, which I'm doing at the moment in somatic healing specifically. So, and I work with a lot of spiritual teachers and spiritual guides as well. So I've been doing that, and yeah.
So, but with the stuff that you have found kind of like independently, are there, because like not obviously everyone can get access easily or affordably to these types of therapy. Are there any good resources that you found on where people can kind of maybe tap into some of the more, I always like to start with ethics. It's like some of the more safe to try techniques, and like it's like, for example, learning about tapping or anything like that. Are there any places where people can do that without, if they've not got access to a somatic healer in their area or they've not got the money for it?
Honestly, I would just say YouTube. YouTube's probably the best for just typing in what it is that you're after and different kinds of breath work. But if you're going to start a certain kind of breath work, I would say like a more yogic kind of practice. I don't know a whole lot about the yogic kind of practice breath work, if I'm honest. So, but from what I do know is it's a lot calmer kind of breath work. So YouTube's honestly the best place for it. Just typing in. Yeah.
Awesome. So in some of the questions we discussed before the podcast, one of them that came up is, why is it important for you to create a platform and safe space to talk about trauma?
Oh, I like this question.
Well, you suggested it. So.
Oh, did I? I completely forgot. I didn't realize.
I was going to say, I'd love to sit here and say, yes, I'm a fantastic interviewer. It's like, I come up with all the greatest questions, but I can't take credit for this one. This was one of yours.
I didn't remember doing that. There you go.
I've got them just over there, you see.
Prepared. You are good.
I am so not prepared. I'm just really good at winging it.
It's all right, me too. So I would say I think there needs to be more education out there, and especially, it's not as talked about within general community, let's say, like general society. You're not just going to walk up to someone and be like, hey, what's your traumas? Let's unfold your traumas and let's get to the root of it.
Yeah, that's totally what I do. Shh, don't tell anybody.
I love it.
I am the worst person to ask, how are you? Because I will give you a full answer. Or if I ask the other person, I am totally ready for a full answer. But yeah, you are right. It is a bit, I probably do need to find, there is a sweet spot between not caring about people's traumas and immediately asking them instead of first saying hello. But sorry, carry on.
No, I so respect that. I totally respect that. I guess just providing a safe space for people to be able to feel like they can open up and they can connect, and, a platform to be able to talk about different kinds of traumas. And, because I think especially for people who have, from my own personal experience anyways, like often I haven't felt like seen or heard or, like understood, because I guess like for me anyways, in my personal experience, it wasn't well talked about and it wasn't well known. So like having a safe space and a platform to be able to do that, where people do understand and maybe have their own stories and, really connect over something like that, I think it's, for me, it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So you say you've mentioned it, it wasn't talked about a couple of times, and obviously, right, when you talk about the original diagnosis, it's like the information wasn't quite there yet. What is something now that you wish you'd be able to say to 14-year-old you?
That everything's going to be okay, and it's going to get better. It's going to get better. Yeah, I think.
Is there any from a practical point of view that you'd basically say to do this?
I'd just say try Somatic Healing.
Yeah. I would say, so going back to that though, when you said you experienced your hand shrinking, like with everything you've been through, do you have like a different perspective or any more clarity on that particular moment now?
Yeah. I definitely do. Yeah.
What does that mean now, or what do you think you were experiencing at the time?
Well, without going into too much detail, had quite a few traumas around that age as well. Okay. So I realize now it was my brain's way of protecting myself. So, I'm actually very grateful that I had that protector, and the fact that it protected me from maybe what I couldn't cognitively, accept then. So, yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've got a couple of experiences of dissociation from when I was younger, and it was always basically straight after big traumas. It's I remember the trauma, like weirdly, and I remember after the trauma, but I don't remember. There's bits that I don't remember in the middle, and it's in fact, actually, the YouTube short I put out just before I went live today is about the fact that with our minds, if they need to filter out feelings, it's not like, let's apply the sadness filter today and we'll filter out sadness. It's like, we filter out feelings. That's it. They're all gone. Sorry, no feelings, none for you. Because we can't filter out just the bad ones. So we're going to have to filter out the bad ones and the good ones. And then it takes a bit of time. Sometimes, like, you know, if we're trying to keep those bad ones out forever and never deal with them, it stunts us in being able to actually then let the good ones in. It makes us defensive. It makes us withheld. So yeah, I think that's important. So at what point was it where you were like, okay, like this has changed things so much for me. I now want to go and teach other people here. What was the motivation there?
I guess just to be able to, honestly, just to simplify, just to be able to help others, like just really to be able to help others. And I think, like, coming from more of like a personal experience, I don't want to pretend something that I'm not, but just from a personal experience point of view as well, and what has helped me and what hasn't helped me and what may help other people, as well as, you know, different things that they can try out individually to see what works for them. So really it just came down to I really wanted to help and try to figure out how. And I was like, right, and from my own personal experience, I can kind of pull on certain things and see what I can create. Yeah.
Is there a sort of a message, you know, like that you wish you could like put out to a huge bunch of people who like might not kind of be going through the same sort of process of trying to figure themselves out, getting various different diagnoses across the years, like things that you wish, you know, other people could hear? Is there anything like that?
I guess I would just say to start slowly, for one, and that everyone's kind of, you know, going at the pace that they want to and they need to, and just to be patient with themselves. And if one thing doesn't work for them, then maybe try something else out, or, you know, but overall that you're always going to be okay. I think that's a really important message, because I know for myself personally, when I've been really down, it's so easy to forget that it is going to get okay. And the contrast is kind of the same when you're really high up. It's very easy to forget how, you know, how down you can get. So, yeah.
Well, I actually think the narrative we tell ourselves there is really important, because it's funny you should say that, because when I have bipolar disorder, and just like you, I had my first diagnosis at 14. Mine was very, very rushed and somewhat questionable. And it's been later confirmed by 2 more doctors and denied by a 3rd one. So I might have bipolar for, like, I might not, who knows. I've certainly experienced a lot of what you're supposed to experience, but the narrative I used to tell myself when I was told, again, I always think back to when that diagnosis came through and what I was told. And what I was told at that point really shaped the narrative of me for a while, because I wasn't told if I wish that it had been told to me like this: you will have normal emotions, but you will also have a wider range of emotions than most normal people. You will experience higher highs than they do, and you will experience lower lows than they do, and you will move between those feelings more rapidly than other people, which is basically that's kind of BPD, only slowed down. Basically, is why a lot of people call BPD bipolar, only faster is the. Now, I wish they'd have told me that. They didn't tell me that. It wasn't called bipolar at that point. It was called manic depression. Because I'm 14 was a little bit further ago than me than it was for you, I'm guessing. Quite a bit. But it was called manic depression at the time and not bipolar disorder. So I was told about what mania was. It's like, you're going to have these periods of being high. And I was told what depression was, and you're going to have these periods of being low. That was all I was told. I wasn't told that, you know, they're going to pass, they're going to be temporary or anything like that. I was just told you're going to go between these 2 things. Polar, bipolar. It's polar. There is no, it's like there is no earth in between the 2 poles. It's like there is just the 2 poles. And that narrative really became my experience for another 14 years, I'd say, until I was about 28. I genuinely, it's not that I didn't experience the bits in the middle, but because my narrative said I'm either here or I'm there, my lens would filter the whole thing and make me feel as if I'm always at one of those two poles. And on the days where I was feeling normal, that wouldn't be getting logged anywhere. You know, that'd just be like forgotten. And but the problem was when you said, like, you know, when you're up, you don't always think this will pass too. I used to think I'm always like this when I was at the bottom. And whenever I was up, I didn't even allow myself to enjoy it because I was like, it always comes crashing back down. Now, those two beliefs, this is one of the things I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy for me, is because I explained those two beliefs to my therapist, and she was like, do you understand that those two beliefs contradict one another? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, if you're always like this, you can't ever be like that. And if this comes crashing down, then this has to go up. But I wasn't. That's not the narrative I was telling myself. And then I was seeing her at the same time as my doctor pulled in this primary care practitioner for me at the same time, so who was just teaching me mindfulness, and it literally overlapped perfectly within like a week or so of each other, that she told me that, and then I got taught the mindfulness of this too shall pass and focusing on the, you know, your emotions being clouds and moving and all the rest of that. And those two things I think just happened at the exact same moment for me. And then I started paying attention to and filtering to notice how many normal days there were. And I was like, there's so many more normal days than there are depressed days. And there's more depressed days than there are manic days. It was like, and actually, wow. But honestly, that perspective shift, that's like one of the most changing things. And at the time, actually, I stopped, not for other people, because to say this to other people is weird, but I stopped saying I have bipolar disorder when that happened. I started saying to myself, I suffer from the symptoms of bipolar disorder, because I have a cold. I'm currently symptomatic. I have this. I'm prone to getting colds. Means I get colds from time to time, and so for me, it is like I have bipolar. Was I'm always symptomatic? No, I stopped using that narrative. I started saying I am prone to the symptoms of bipolar disorder, and as a result, that meant I wasn't always symptomatic, and I started noticing those normal days. Which was nice because, you know, as I say, the depressed ones tended to outweigh the manic ones, and the depressed ones sometimes last for months. The mania, you know, I think the most ever that lasted was 5 days. But actually, even then, the mania, you don't want the mania to last, because it's like, hello, where's sleep? Where's that gone? It's like, I don't know where it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of strength in understanding what our narrative is, and I use the word narrative quite deliberately, because we tend to believe that our narrative is our truth, and there is a difference between truth and narrative. You know, truth is the objective truth of what's really going on, whereas your narrative is your version of the story that kind of fits with your bias on the world. So that got accidentally deep. No.
I absolutely love it, and I just want to say as well, I love how, you know, there's 2 points there. I love how you said about, you know, really talking about the narrative versus, you know, what actually has happened, like creating your own kind of story as well, because I do think it's very easy to go based on what has happened and go like this. And I know for myself, I still do that quite frequently. Like, I'm still in the midst of where I'm at right now of creating my own story and what my truth is, and pulling apart, you know, what is meant for me and what's not meant for me. And there was another thing that you said, and I'm so sorry, but I've kind of forgotten midway.
It's all right, I do that to people.
No, take it. Come on, I do this all the time. But what was it? It was where you were talking about it will come back to me. I promise. I do this often. It's not you. It's me. Yeah, there was a point which you said about the psychologist, and basically how there was, after you talked about the balance.
Yeah.
And then, anyways, it'll come back. I'll rewatch it.
Well, I'll get with trains of thought. Mine goes off all the time. So I've actually found usually that, like, trying to drag it back on track doesn't get it back there, for me at least. Whereas it'll pop back if it'll pop back into your head when you're not thinking about it. Speaking of popping back into your head, so basically, I want to kind of delve back. I should have done this in order, but as I said to you in the first message I sent you, it's like yes, I'm neurodiverse. My brain goes neurodiverse. I'm neurodivergent because we're all neurodiverse for a start. Basically, that we actually are, because neurodiverse includes neurotypical. I only learned that recently. Neurodivergent is how my brain is, and I with the podcast, it's like, okay, most of your listeners aren't. So it's like, let's try and put this in a logical, sequential order where everything is there rather than on the tangents. But I totally missed on this when you started talking about trauma being stored within the body. So how is trauma stored in the body?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, if anyone's interested in reading about how trauma is stored in the body, there is an amazing book which I've been reading. It's called The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
So one thing on that, actually, before we go on with that book, if you did you find any of it triggering? I
didn't, but I think I know what you're going to say.
I was going to say, anyone, I've got this book and I understand as well, and I've got it on audiobook and I've never actually listened to it, but apparently it does describe. It describes in the earliest, right near the beginning, a particular patient was someone who had raped somebody, and it was their trauma having committed the rape as opposed to being a victim of rape, which for a lot of people with trauma, especially if their trauma is around sexual assault, that can be extremely triggering. That it's like we're actually asking the person to get inside the mind and understand the trauma of a person. Now, I do think that in order to actually do that to a person, there's probably I never say something wrong with people. That's not the way I think of it. But I think there's definitely something going on there in order for someone to be able to justify those actions in their own mind. And I also do believe that, that abusers don't just deserve but probably need mental health care if we're ever to be in a world without abuse. But I also am much more protective of victims and understand that can be quite triggering. From what I hear, I've got the audiobook, I've not listened to it, but also if you search for The Body Keeps the Score alternatives, there are a lot of people who, especially from the trauma-informed community, have recommended alternatives. If any of if WABA, could you be able to just look up a couple of those alternatives for us so we can put them in line with the podcast as well, please? And I'll read a couple of them out in a minute. But carry on. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was in there. So go on. What was so you said that what was the experience there?
What was the initial question?
The initial question was how does the body store trauma?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So basically, from what I have researched and from my own experience, basically over an extensive period of time, your body keeps the memory of past trauma. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, and I will just go and give an example based off my own experience because that's where I'm at, is, even now, so say, for example, all my past traumas, say if you grew up in an abusive household or, where you're walking on eggshells all the time or, you weren't sure what was going to happen next or other multiple traumas, I'm not going to get into depth with them.
Yep.
But basically your body then starts to react in, the fight or flight mode and in them kind of ways. So your body gets used to that because you're so used to being on the edge of what's going to happen next that you're preparing for it. So say, if shouting was a thing within your household and, you're waiting for the next time somebody's going to shout or something like this, your body is then going to keep going into fight or flight mode. And eventually, over an extensive period of time, that can turn into freeze mode, or dissociation, Yeah. So that's kind of how your body defends itself when it's scared, basically. And when it comes to the present, and I know this for myself, when it's come to the present time, my body still does that so often, so often, because it's as soon as I am, even doing something that's possibly out of my comfort zone, like coming onto this podcast today, it's been something that's been so out of my comfort zone. And, I had to do a lot of...
You're nailing it, by the way.
Thank you. A lot of things to really calm my nervous system. And so I had to do a lot of research into why my body kept doing this. I was, very, very confused. And, basically that's what I've kind of found over an extensive period of time. And it's because of your cortisol levels as well, like just from what I found, but, your cortisol levels are up if you've been through extensive trauma. Therefore, your window of tolerance is so much shorter, isn't it?
Yep.
Like if you've been through trauma, you're up here compared to I don't want to say normal. I don't like that word, but I guess
those lucky non-traumatized folk. But yeah, it's a weird use of the word normal, but yes, I understand.
I don't know what else. I don't like that word because I don't know what else to use. But that's kind of the basis, isn't it? And then I guess once, if you have been traumatized, you're further up here, waiting on guard. You're waiting on edge for the next thing to happen when, potentially not going to happen. So it's kind of, I'm going to summarize it there. That's kind of,
good. A couple of alternatives to when the body keeps the score. I've actually read this one, which is When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate's got some great stuff out there. Some of it's a little bit controversial, as always. But again, it's controversial. It's like he's on the cutting edge of science and in a lot of places. There's one called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, but that sounds like it could be quite traumatic to read. What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce D. Perry. My Grandmother's Hands. I've heard this one's quite good. I think I was going to say Racialized Trauma and the Mending of Our Bodies and Hearts by Resmaa Menakem. It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Right, 1 second. Goes to Amazon. Rush order. I'm going to go get that. I'm going on holiday with my mum in a few weeks. I'm going to read it in front of her. I'm joking. My mum's... my poor mother. My poor mother gets thrown into... Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma. I've heard of that one as well. I've heard very good things of this one, which is It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallin.
Haven't heard of
it. It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. But from what I hear on The Body Keeps the Score, it's if you are... I don't get triggered by hardly anything. Like I don't even know what I get triggered by, to be perfectly honest. I'm kind of able to detach myself from things from those things quite a lot when reading and when trying, especially because we have a no graphic detail rule over here, but we never used to. It was never there at first. I've always I actually brought the no graphic detail rule in for the protection of the audience and not for my own protection really. But at the same time, I've seen. I see every single week. I see people talking about that book and within the trauma informed community being like, look, you shouldn't be recommending this to anybody. I'm like, I disagree with they shouldn't be recommended to anybody, but it certainly should come with a little bit of a warning. But yeah, agreed.
It's and I'm very glad that you brought that up. So thank you, because it definitely does need to come with a disclaimer, because it's it can be. I can see how it can be very triggering for people. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up as well.
Yeah, if anyone wants what I found to be a really good book last year and really easy to listen to if you like audiobooks. This isn't particularly about trauma, but is Why Has No One Ever Told Me This by Dr. Julie. She's lovely and she's dead nice, and she's actually she talks about things from a very trauma-informed point of view and talks about doing what you can based on where you currently are. But also, to my community, if you do listen to that book and you'll be like, why has no one told me this before? You'll be like, Dave's been telling me this for years, because I think there was only about 3 things. This is maybe why I liked it. My own ego got stroked a little bit. I'm like, ooh, instead of me being jealous of big famous doctors saying all the stuff that I've been saying for years and therefore doing better, I was like, I felt validated instead. I was like, oh, big famous doctors saying all the stuff I've been saying for years. I must actually be on the right track. So that was kind of fun. So what's next for you then?
Oh, well, I'm just going to continue on this path of personal healing, and hopefully just starting to branch out and learn more within somatic healing work as well, and kind of see where that takes me and go down that kind of pathway as well. Just I have lots of different ideas, and I think that's my thing, is I have so many different ideas that I've got to try and put it into one. So
Relatable.
You get it?
Oh, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
So I think that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah. Amazing. Is your plan to kind of like work locally with people on a one-to-one basis, or groups, or online, or all of the above?
It'll be mostly one-to-one work.
Yeah.
But I have mostly one-on-one work online, but then I've also been offered a space at a women's circle working with a shamanic healer, which is pretty cool. I'm excited to learn more about that and do that as well. So that'll be group work.
Shamanic healing is another one that I want to get someone on and dig into their brain about.
It's very interesting.
I take the Bruce Lee approach to all of this, which Bruce Lee talked about mental health all the time, as we well know. He didn't, I don't think. He might have done, but the quote is that you take a bit of what you like, leave what you don't, and add a bit of your own. And I actually think that was his kind of methodology for creating Jeet Kune Do. That his kind of martial art was it took the bits he liked from other martial arts, got rid of the bits that he thought weren't as useful, and then added some of his own. And I actually think in this area, that is, again, I always come back to ethics, but as long as you're doing it ethically, as long as you're not doing anything that can cause anyone harm, I think it's I think that's actually the way forward with a lot of this. Is you can take pieces of CBT, you can take pieces of DBT, pieces of shamanic healing, whatever it might be, and then put that together for a person, and add a little bit of whatever your own healing and your own journey has taught you, and you end up with like kind of something where people are like, yeah, why has no one ever told me this before? And it's like, because it takes actually. Well, another way I will say it is that I like to say to people is that we may all have the same ingredients, but not anyone else has your recipe. It's like we may all have access to similar ideas.
I like that. Yeah.
You can borrow it if you want. Just credit it. No, just be like. I always actually say this. It's like, if anyone wants to repost or share or do or use any of my stuff, just bloody do it. It's like, I'm not precious about these things. There's one which is my baby. Something called slingshots and boomerangs. Right. It's the only one that I'm precious about. That if I saw this pop up anywhere else, and the person wasn't crediting me, I would feel like someone's like stolen one of my children. But which is basically a boomerang. A boomerang is a behavior that is a coping mechanism that gives you something in the short term but takes away from you in the long term. And a slingshot is a coping mechanism that might feel difficult to do in the short term, but gives you something in the long term. So boomerang goes forward before it comes back. Alcohol, drugs, anything like that, they are coping mechanisms. People turn to them because they work in the short term, but they tend to give a person negative consequences. And a slingshot is the opposite of that, which is actually getting into somatic healing or getting into CBT, DBT, whatever it might be, even getting into breath work. It's not easy to sit and breathe for the first time you do it. It's not easy, and it's also not going to give you instant gratification either. That's a slingshot. It's going to take effort. It's going to feel unnatural, feel uncomfortable first, but it's going to pay off further down the line. And I'm precious on that one, but all the rest of them, as far as I'm concerned, we're just one big global consciousness, and we're all just popping up with ideas that someone else has already said or done, or Confucius said it in one way thousands of years ago, or the Buddha said it last week, because there's probably still a Buddha apparent. I don't know. So yeah, is there anything that I've not asked that you think's important that you want to kind of get in before we wrap up?
Let me think about it. I don't think so. I think I think that's kind of where I'm at the moment, and just I'm pretty much said everything that I've wanted to say, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity as well, and thank you a lot.
It's all right.
I do appreciate it.
Well, I'll look forward to catching up with you in a couple of years once you're in your own practice, and it's a different part of the journey because it's always evolving, always changing. I'm going to pad for time for a couple of minutes just to see if any questions come in from chat. If they don't come in, don't take that as a bad thing. It just usually means that you've said what you need to say quite well. I've actually been learning this recently in social media, that I took this approach when I'm doing like a 1-minute clip or whatever. I want it to be like ironclad and to say everything it's supposed to say, and I want to make sure it's like I've got it right. And that's really cool, apart from the fact that when I asked for feedback a few weeks back as to like why my stuff doesn't really get many comments or much feedback, and the most common piece of feedback that came back was, well, you just say it so well, so it felt like there was nothing to add. And I was like, damn it, by excelling in my expertise, heavy sarcasm for anyone who's listening just on audio, by the way, but by excelling in my own expertise, I have gone and created a social media trap for myself. But yeah, it's okay. Well, there's nothing coming from chat yet, but where can people find you if they want to find more about you / come along for the journeys, whatever, keep up to date with where things go for the future?
Predominantly, I will be on Instagram, which I believe, I know you've shared my my Instagram on there. So, if you just click on there.
For those who are on audio only, I believe it is at Kyra Houghton, KYHOUGHTON_.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it.
Cool.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for doing that.
So but cool, and amazing. Right, well, thank you very much for coming and joining me. It's been cool learning about it. As I say, I've probably known little bits and pieces without knowing it as well, which is kind of nice to bring it together. And I've now got a much clearer understanding of like what somatic healing actually is. So that's really useful, and I hope obviously
thank you.
The audience will get that.
I do appreciate it.
Cool. And thanks. And I will, as I said, let's do this in a couple. When you get to a point where you think with the practice, right? Okay, I've got a load of stuff I want to talk about. Just pop into my DMs and we'll set something up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate it, and I will speak to you soon then.
Thank you.
And maybe in a few years.
Well, knows? I was going to say I'll probably speak to you in between now and then, but if not, I'll speak to you in a couple of years. Cheers.
All right. Bye, Dave.
Bye.